Ladies, gentlemen, and Harajam of all ages, we've got some news! It's been a pretty slow few weeks when it comes to updates for Diablo 4, but things are finally going down as the time before Season 2 is slowly dwindling down, and of course we're going to talk about it, break it all down, what it means, and what we can learn from it. While there were multiple things going on this week, the most important one of them, by all means, by a pretty large margin too, is the proper announcement and a bit of details about the 2 developer-filled streams that we have coming up to talk about all the changes leading into Season 2. Before diving into the details, let's talk about the timing. The first stream coming up is going to be this upcoming Wednesday, October 4th, then 6 days later on the 10th, a Tuesday, we are going to have a follow-up to that. On top of that though, we also got a bit more juicy details on it all, as the blog post that was released to announce these streams had a few more words to say about them too. Starting off with stream number 1, the one that's coming up sooner, this is mostly going to be about the overarching bits of Season 2, what the season is in greater detail, and a proper deep dive on some of the actual new mechanics that we have coming. And it's entirely possible that this could come with a new trailer as well to show us the new information related to the season. This part is going to be rough, probably, because from what we know about Season 2, it is looking a lot like Season 1 was, but just a little bit bigger. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on developers in this to surpass that expectation that we have. There either needs to be multiple new activities that are less reminiscent of the previous season, maybe even adding in a bit of endgame, of course, or the sheer size of it all just needs to be big enough that we stop caring that it looks a bit familiar. If they want the attention of the player base, or even to try and bring in new players, they really seriously need to deliver here. And honestly, not even just at this stage, but the entirety of both streams needs to really nail it if they want people to let their guard down after the problems this game has had so far, and actually allow themselves to have any hype at all. The second part of this first stream then is going to be focused on the quality of life changes and updates that they are bringing to the game, which is mostly things that we already know about because they've brought them up before. And the specific things they mentioned in this blog are adding stash space, which is a good sign that they are bringing it up, because hopefully that means they have a proper fix this time rather than our previous little band-aid of getting one extra stash tab. We know that they intended to get the whole gems counting as currency instead of taking up space inside of Season 2, but that will honestly only be so much of a big difference. There's a lot more to be done here. They also say stash functionality, which I'm really hoping means some actual means of searching or proper filtering for your stash so that you can actually see what we're going through and look at our stash better, because right now the whole stash system just as a whole is a nightmare, and it definitely needs some love. As well, they mentioned improvements to dungeons, which is incredibly non-specific, but definitely an intriguing thing to say, and I want to know what that means. Changes to mounts, which presumably means the things that they've talked about before, like the ability to use the spur action to get through barricades, maybe if we're lucky, some speed increases, or even some improvements to the way that horses deal with terrain, like climbing up rocks or something, so we don't have those just heinous cooldowns between mounting up. If they changed the cooldowns on the mount system, it would actually do so much for it all on its own. Then it just says much more, so theoretically they have a lot to talk about in regards to quality of life, which is nice to see, but it entirely comes down to how much they've actually done, if they've properly targeted the actual problem areas, and if the way that they change it makes it genuinely better. All in all, this first stream seems pretty cookie cutter, a lot of what I was expecting to see them get out of the way first. The bigger announcements and reveals for the season itself in an attempt to build hype alongside the quality of life changes they are making in an attempt to rebuild a bit of trust with the community. This first stream is officially considered a developer update, which means that it will be more structured. There should be a bunch of visual references for the things that they are talking about on the screen so we can actually see it in action, and it will be a little bit more streamlined too, a little bit more condensed, but the expected duration is still around 2 hours, including a question and answer section 2 that will likely be 30 minutes, so we'll have around 90 minutes of the planned information with graphics to really help show what they're talking about in a bit of a more proper way. That is a lot of time, to say the least, and hopefully what that means is that they have a lot to say, because again, I think this is a very big make or break point for the future of this game. It hit its low point around the beginning of Season 1 with patch 1.1's release, and this is their chance to hit at least a little bit of redemption for some people, though it's likely a good amount of people are just gone for good already as far as that goes. Then we have the second stream scheduled for the 10th, and this one is being labeled a Campfire chat, which generally means it'll be a bit more lax. Part of the discussion will be talking about player response to the previous stream and fielding any concerns that we might be bringing up after we've seen it, and it likely won't have quite as many graphics floating around either to back up what they're saying, as will be a touch less scripted, a bit more improvised, just talking more, just having a discussion about various topics. That said, we know some of their topics, which are class balance changes and reworks to several in-game systems. That first part has promise. Class balance is important. Hopefully they're going to do what they promised us the last time they talked about balance and apply the nerfs and buffs at the same time, so it just makes it different, rather than giving us nerfs first, which sucks, and then making us wait a month before we get the fun part. so we'll have to see how that goes. But it is worth mentioning that this stream is also theoretically going to be 2 hours long, presumably another 30 minutes of question and answer in it, which would mean 90 minutes to talk about class balance changes and reworks to in-game systems. The big in-game system that we already know is getting totally reworked for Season 2 is Resistances. Yeah, it's sort of crazy to say that even now. I mean, it really surprises me how broken Resistances were at launch of this AAA title, and it's taken them this long to work it out after the fact, but we were promised elemental resistances actually mattering in Season 2, and now we should get to see that bear fruit if all is well, which will likely add a new layer of complexity to builds that we didn't have before, at least, asking you to consider your survivability just a little bit more. At least, well, that's the hope. As far as other changes, we don't really know much. The statement reworks to several in-game systems is about as vague as you could possibly be about this. That could mean changing the font for all we know. It just means that they aren't going to tell us yet. They're not ready to. That said, not long after this was posted, we had a couple of tweets from Rod Ferguson, the general manager of the Diablo franchise, that gave us a couple of hints of some changes coming up. This person here asked if we're going to see some proper world boss timer actually in the game at any point. The 30-minute one that we have currently isn't great, so especially if they have a sort of cycle, which they do, there's no real reason that they can't tell us when the next one is going to be the moment that the current one dies. I don't see why they don't, which would let you actually plan around it if you care to do so without using things like external websites to get the job done, because if the websites can do it, why shouldn't the game? Rod's response is, oh, you're gonna like the streams. So it seems pretty definitive that that's going to be a thing that we're gonna be having addressed. Unless he was just ignoring the question and responding to the person saying that they love the game and are excited, and it's just like, oh, if you love the game, then you're gonna love the streams. But that's probably not the case, because we also have this exchange with someone asking about the frequency of world bosses. The specific times that they spawn are all just bad luck around for them all around the clock, and I definitely feel that with them being inconsistently around 6 hours apart, more or less, you can realistically catch 2 a day if you're lucky at most, as a working adult human who has to sleep at night. And Rod's response is, please tune in to the dev streams, which seems a little bit less implicatory than the previous tweet, but given the context of the previous tweet being added as well, this likely means that this will be happening to some degree. We might actually get something from there. So of course the easy inference from these two put together is that we will probably be having more frequent world bosses showing up in some way, and then there will also be some sort of timer you can follow in the game to properly see where they'll be ahead of time and when. And with that doozy covered, now we do have a slight bit of other news, which is a new hotfix that hit the game a couple of days ago. Nothing particularly major here for the majority of players by any means. The Hatred's Chosen buff in Fields of Hatred no longer gives seeds of hatred from players or pets, only from killing monsters. This was something that was abused in various ways, especially against things like Necromancer minions to just farm up these things stupidly fast. They fixed it in various ways before because it had problems, but it seems like they just decided to say, man, it's not that big of a deal, just get rid of that entirely and make it more rewarding to do the PvE than it is to do the PvP, and honestly, fair enough, I suppose. The second part of this is a bit nice though, which is fixing the fact that sometimes world bosses wouldn't give you grim favors when you kill them. It seems that this was actually just a bug that has persisted since, well, the launch of the game, and they just fixed it so that it will consistently give you the Whispers of the Dead progress every time that you manage to kill one. Then finally, there's something that we should touch on here, which is a reported Blizzard leak that happened over on 4chan with those words that I just said, though I should absolutely emphasize that this should be taken with a grain of salt. Don't trust everything you see on the internet without a source. But about 30% of the time that there's leaks on this website, they do wind up being fully accurate out of nowhere, so it's worth at least seeing what it has to say. Lots of general things about Blizzard as a whole, talking about other games, but there are two major ones that affect the Diablo 4 community if true. That second line there, Diablo 4 has lost most of its original development staff, and the seasonal team is taking over and are working on an expansion to act as a soft reboot. Well, honestly, that's not a massive surprise to me at all. It's not a leap in logic. Generally speaking, making a game in the first place takes a lot more manpower and resources than just keeping it running after the fact. So I would expect the team to shrink, or at least a lot of people to move over to working on the expansion for the future, but it's the amount that are left that matters for sure. We already know that they are working on an expansion that we'll likely know a lot more about as soon as next year even, and that's fine. But then we have the line at the very end, which definitely does affect us, as we've seen multiple tweets from Rod Ferguson in the last couple of months with pages just full of job listings for Diablo 4. The company is a rotating door of staff, quickly leaving due to the pay and working conditions, and that I can definitely see being both true and a very serious issue for the long-term health of the game. I know it's weird to think about the long-term health when the short-term health has been such a problem, but it is worth mentioning. Again, take all of this with a grain of salt. When it comes from anonymous people with no sources, it should absolutely be met with skepticism, but that said, leak or not, I'm pretty sure what they said, at least related to Diablo 4, is actually true, is it just sort of makes sense. And that's pretty much it for now, everyone. Not much variance in the news, only a couple of actual things to talk about, really, but there was a lot of detail to actually go into on those topics. Of course, I'm interested to see how this all plays out, whether it will be a bit of a train wreck, some sort of ridiculous unforeseen recovery that makes the game become a masterpiece out of nowhere, or the most likely option, somewhere straight down the middle of those two things that has a lot of people still uninterested in returning, but also gets a fair bit of interest generated from the people who were on the fence until now. After each stream, of course, I will be wrapping it all up here on the channel, condensing down each of these 2-hour streams into a nice, neat, short little package for you all, so come check those out if you're interested when they happen. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.